Hello and welcome to this episode of the Housing Geospatial podcast, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything that relates to either housing or geospatial, preferably if there's a little bit of both. Housing Geospatial was formed as we believe place matters for social housing and that geospatial information is woefully underrepresented in the housing sector. This series is around sharing a collective knowledge of those within the housing sector. You can find us either on our LinkedIn group page or feel free to head on over to our website at www.housinggeospatial.co.uk. I'm your host, Chris Kinnear, and today I am joined by the amazingly insightful Jonathan Bates, who is the Senior Product Owner for Street at Geoplace. Hi, Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for having me. I've been listening to podcasts for a while and really enjoyed them. So it's an honour to be on here.
Oh, amazing. Now, one of the things we have to talk about first, normally we do our usual question, but today you've won a very special award within Geo, a brand new one. So massive congratulations on being part of the inaugural Geo 100. Can you tell us a bit more about what that Geo 100 is and essentially kind of the prospect, the reward of being nominated for an award for it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Geo 100, it was kind of initially launched at a combination of Geo Business and Geo Mob last June. Alex Rottersley from from iDocs, apologies, was, I think, the brains behind it. But the idea was to really bring together and kind of highlight the excellent work that's happening around the geospatial community, and similar to kind of other initiatives, kind of highlight some of the key faces and people within the industry that are perhaps excelling in some capacity. So I was absolutely delighted to be included in that. Still don't really feel like I can belong there, but really nice to see that the judges, including like kind of Ed Parsons from Google, perhaps saw something in me. So yeah, really chuffed to be included in that. It is going to be kind of a yearly activity, and like I said, last year it launched at Geo Business down at the Excel. I think the plan is for this year it also to launch at Geo Business on the 3rd of June. And yeah, it's really great. Hopefully we'll get some kind of steam within the industry, and it's you can go to geo100.com and you can see all the amazing winners on there for the inaugural year, but they're looking to do it every year, and with that you can log on. Anybody within the sector can log on and nominate people that they feel are kind of really excelling or putting in that extra effort. So yeah, I'd encourage everyone to take part.
That's awesome, and I'm definitely going to be nominating various people from the geospatial, from the housing sector, in for it as well, because we've had some amazing guests on there. So, moving on to our regular set of questions, I guess. So, how are you involved in housing and/or geospatial?
Yeah, so as you said, I work at Geoplace, and you can probably gather from that we are inherently geospatial as a business. We deal predominantly with kind of street and address data, but I really feel that's a kind of the foundation data sets for everything that happens in geospatial, and that touches a lot of different areas. So my main focus is around the National Street Gazetteer, and a real emphasis for that is around highways and streetworks and roadworks. And that data set then kind of facilitates streetworks and roadworks being planned centrally. And a massive thing that's happened over the last 10 years has been the gigabit rollout, or BDUK. And that's about how we can get high-speed data to as many people as possible, including kind of housing associations, obviously. And I think housing associations had quite a kind of unique challenge in dealing with the rollout. In a lot of the time, it was very well planned, very well structured, how we actually get the fibre optics to the roads itself. But then we really need to start to think about how to coordinate that work happening between getting it from the road into the homes. And I think that's where I kind of got more involved. I think you and I, that's where we first met, having that conversation. So yeah, it's really kind of opened my eyes to the kind of the challenges of that last section. We kind of think it's hard enough getting the fibre along all the roads, but often trying to actually get it to the people that really need it, it is that last hurdle to get over.
I love chatting about streets. When we first met, God, it must have been about 4 years ago or something, 3 or 4 years ago. You know, it's really interesting seeing the data you take. Before we talk more about that, you've had a really interesting career. Can you tell the listeners more about it and kind of what led you to being where you are now?
Yeah, it's kind of you to say that actually. I kind of thought it's more kind of unconventional maybe, but I perhaps wasn't the most academic at school. I was always really into sports and kind of basketball was my thing. I'm quite tall, so that helps a lot. And I always kind of assumed I'd be a kind of professional athlete when I grew up, and perhaps didn't pay as much attention as I should have at school. And when I was 17, I actually moved to America to play basketball out there and try and pursue the career that way. Unfortunately, I had quite a serious illness actually, which kind of really hampered my kind of professional career. So in my kind of early 20s, I had to kind of think again about like, what it was I wanted to do in the long term, how I could kind of take care of my body. And I've tried a lot of different kind of careers and different paths out, and was extremely lucky to actually meet somebody. It was called Ian Winters, who worked down in Ada and Worthing, and he was a GIS professional, and I'd always kind of loved geography at school. It was my favourite subject, but it was absolutely mind-blowing to see what could be done with GIS and what he was using it for, how it was kind of implemented in different services. And luckily, I kind of struck up a really kind of strong friendship with him, and he started kind of teaching me how to use it, how to implement it. And I was really lucky that a position came up at Ada and Worthing councils in their GIS department, working with street name and numbering and the LLPG. It started off as a temporary role, and I was over the moon to get it. And I kind of feel from playing basketball, kind of have that kind of work ethic to kind of really try and master those skills and learn them. So I kind of learned everything I could about GIS. Had an amazing person to learn from in Ian. And from there, I worked there for a couple of years. I was really kind of thirsty to kind of take on more responsibility and learn different subjects. So after that, a position came up just down the road at Brighton and Hove City Council, which is where I actually first started working on the street as it is. So I jumped from kind of addressing and housing to streets and highways, and just found the whole industry absolutely fascinating. I think there's so much that happens in the background to kind of keep the networks moving. So much kind of information engineering that goes into the roads, and kind of thought and planning that goes into kind of planning streetworks and roadworks. I really got the bug for it, and kind of really enjoyed working on that. I always try and put myself forward and kind of volunteer for groups where possible. And it just so happened I was working with Geoplace on the National Street Gazetteer. I was a custodian at Brighton and Hove City Council, and I started working with Geoplace on the technical working group, which is their kind of specifications for how they create the data. And just struck up a really great kind of working relationship with kind of Richard Groombridge and Simon Bailey at Geoplace. And I was just very lucky in that a position came up there a couple of years later, and was successful in interviewing there. Jump forward a few years, it's 10 years in January that I've been there, and it's been an incredible journey kind of working. It's been a real step up from working at that kind of local scale to actually working at the national scale, working across all of England, all of Wales, and working closely with central government has been incredibly eye-opening. It's been an interesting career, and it's always busy, always changing. So I really enjoy it.
I love that how you thought it was going to go one direction, and then you just happen to meet someone who's really passionate at what they do, and just that spark of passion was ignited within you. And it's awesome to see how long you've been working with addressing in street data. One thing I think we should probably clarify for the audience is the word gazetteer. Can you just quickly define what that is, just in case anyone who doesn't know?
Oh, that's a really tough one actually. But in because the word itself has been around centuries actually. If you go to the British Library, you can find gazetteers leading back, I think the 1500s and around the Domesday books. But the kind of modern interpretation of gazetteer, as we kind of see it, it's the information about streets and address, that kind of core information. A really key part of it for us is that we assign unique references against every single street and every single property. So on the street side, it's SRNs, unique street reference numbers, and then on the address side, it's unique property reference numbers. And from that, we then build the really kind of core information that people need. So on addresses, it's the addresses, the classifications, the coordinates, the polygons. On the street side, it's information, street names, start dates, whether or not it's maintainable at public expense, and then any kind of problems or special designations that people need to know about when they're planning their works.
Brilliant. Thank you for giving us that quick that definition. I think sometimes we will use, I don't want to use the word jargon, but we'll use our definitions and everything else, and people, I've definitely talked to people who are uncertain about what I'm talking about. So we've heard a little bit about Geoplace from Pam Whitman from Ordnance Survey. Could you tell us a bit about what Geoplace is and more about what its core function is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Geoplace, we're a limited liability partnership set up between Ordnance Survey and the local government association. And effectively, we're tasked with collating the National Street Gazetteer and the National Address Gazetteer, working predominantly with local authorities, but also more and more with third-party data. So we work with transport authorities, national regional authorities, as well as the likes of VOA and other bodies on the address side to kind of create these gazetteers that are kind of feature rich and have everything that people need. The data itself, it kind of flows through to kind of different products. So the data that's collected on the address side feeds through to Ordnance Survey, address space, and then on the street side, it feeds through to OS master map highways. And from that, then there's also things like the open data, so open USRNs and open UPRNs, as well as the linked identifier data sets. So I guess it means we get to kind of work both kind of thinking about the Ordnance Survey products and kind of how to bring value to the market from them, but also with the local government association hat on how we can improve local services. And I think we all feel really passionate about the benefits of the gazetteers and the unique identifiers, how that can improve local authority services for the better. So a big part of what we do is trying to ensure that happens.
That's really, really cool. And I love seeing what Geoplace does as well. So it's really cool having you on today. So you are the senior product owner for Streets. Could you tell us a bit more what that means in kind of how you work day to day and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess kind of at Geoplace, one of the things we've kind of really realized, we consider ourselves a data company, but I think nowadays the data you produce is only as good as the applications that you're collecting it with. And we have a very kind of bespoke system. It's quite niche what we do in the level of detail with addresses and streets. So we kind of really recognize that the data and the applications go hand in hand. So my team with the data team, but really with the data and development team. So it's a combination of kind of subject matter experts such as myself on the street side and Kerry Pierce on the address side. But we work hand in hand with our developers, so both front end and back end developers. So my job is to really kind of translate the requirements from the industry, from the users of the data, and then bring that into the applications that our data submitters do. or use on a regular basis. Big part of what we do is we validate the data that we receive to ensure it's kind of accuracy and quality. And we've got over 1,000 validation errors or validation queries, but we put every single bit of data through that comes in. So a big part of kind of what I do is hopefully kind of instill my kind of industry knowledge into those checks to make sure that the data is kind of fit for purpose and that it's as kind of easy to use as possible for the people creating the data.
I think that there's validation, the fact that you've got over 1,000 checks when the data comes in, I think that's awesome. That's really, really cool. So obviously you're working with streets as the senior product owner. Can you tell us some of the street products that you've already listed some, but could you give us any more examples of the ones you're working with?
Yeah. I'm really lucky in that my kind of core product is the National Street Gazetteer, which is used predominantly in kind of street works and road works for kind of planning whenever somebody's digging up the road. Really core function for that. That data then also feeds into the Ordnance Survey Highways product. So I'm very lucky to work with Ordnance Survey on that, and we work with the stakeholders for that, which is especially the DFT use that for their funding allocations. And I'm again extremely lucky that I get invited to work on some national initiatives. A couple of recent ones that have been very exciting have been NUAR, the National Underground Asset Register. I think they kind of recognised the need for USRNs within that, and the fact that we, as Geoplace, have a national data set up already. So I was part of the data management governance group for NUAR to kind of think about how we could set that up and get the data flowing in and out. And then recently been working with the DFT on the DTRO, which is the Digital Traffic Regulation Order project. And the goal of that is to take everything that's currently available in TROs, which is things like speed limits, parking spaces, all of those things that govern our roads, and make that available as open digital data in a standardized specification, so that everybody can then kind of get access to that and use it accordingly. So a couple of the cool ones I've worked on recently.
That's really, really cool. And I love the idea of the DTRO looking to try and make that as open as possible. I think that's really cool. Plus NUAR. If anyone's not sure on NUAR, I would really recommend looking at it online. We won't go into too much detail here, but it's a really fascinating, brilliant project. So obviously you work on quite a lot of stuff, but are there any cool products that you're working on or projects that you're working on or working with that you can kind of share with us today?
Yeah. So there's a couple that come to mind straight away. One of the things that we do at Geoplace is we set the standards for Gazetteer software and the Gazetteer data, and then we work with an amazing group of software suppliers who then build their Gazetteer software around that. We're currently working on the next iteration of our LSG DCF specification to kind of make that ready and kind of think about what users of the data will need over the next kind of 3 to 5 years. So we're currently in the midst of that, which is really exciting. A big part of that is around the Gazetteer kind of started off as a kind of textual, then started adding kind of linear geometry over time. But more and more the users want that polygonized version of the street, so knowing exactly where the highway extents are. So we're really kind of expanding the scope of what you can do with the Gazetteer, which is really exciting. And then another one, I was really, I keep saying how lucky I am, but earlier this year I took part in the Northumbrian Water Group Innovation Festival up in Newcastle at the racecourse there. And it was actually a tent or a sprint that was set up by DSIT, which is the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. Might need correcting there, but they set up a sprint to trying to unlock the value of NUR. And I was on a team up there with Kevin Ferguson from Durham County Council and Chris Carlin, who's now a member of Geoplace. And we were kind of tasked with trying to think about how NUR could be used with other data sets. And we kind of used our kind of industry knowledge to start thinking about kind of what the problems are in the industry and how the data could solve that. So we actually came up with an idea to try and start predicting where streetworks and roadworks might be happening in the future, and start trying to incentivize collaboration to happen where that's where those sites are likely, to try and minimize the amount the roads get dug up. So yeah, we're calling it the Streetworks collaboration tool, and we're currently working on that. We've got a test area of utilities and local authorities. So yeah, so really exciting that.
I was going to say both of those are really, really cool project. What's really interesting, the non-traditional GIS people might not think this is interesting, but for us GIS people, I think the thing that's really interesting is the change from lines to polygons for exact extents. You know, that's a really big fundamental change, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and you kind of have to think about file sizes, how you transport that, how you get that to the end users, and kind of accuracy that goes along with that too. So yeah, it's a real challenge, and even just thinking about the road networks, how they're structured, junctions are quite the headache when it comes to polygonization, how you avoid overlap. So it's taken a lot of thought and a lot of effort to get to where we are. So yeah.
Yeah, because the current data set looks at just nodes, doesn't it? So you have your line that connects to a node or just a point where the junction is, and then it goes off from there. So that'll be interesting seeing that progression. So you've talked about UPRNs and USRNs and addressing. Now these are integral to how we function actually just as a whole country, and NUR is a great example of some of that as well as other places. And also it's that key link between Geoplace and multiple organizations. Can you tell us a bit more why UPRNs, decent addressing, and USRNs are so important for our country and also for housing associations as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm slightly concerned about time actually, and I feel like we could spend hours talking about these. But yeah, so I think unique identifiers unlock so much potential from data, and bringing different data sets together. We often think of it as kind of an insight as a service that they provide. So having that, so you can quickly query other data sets and bring those insights together. We're seeing more and more data sets now, including USRNs and UPRNs, which is brilliant to see that kind of golden thread of integration between the different systems. And yeah, I think both kind of local government level and central government level, it's becoming essential for every tool to adopt those in them and the benefits that they bring.
I think the line that I wrote down now is insight as a service, and I think that's a great phrase to use, a great line. My big thing is I do not like how we can combine with other data, like how you just talked then about local and central governments, but also healthcare providers, telecoms providers only really deal with UPRNs. Same with energy suppliers, water suppliers. All of these links are through that UPRN, that asset identifier, and USRNs for streetworks and things. And it just opens, from a housing perspective, it just opens so much collaborative doors, and you're not having to do manual checks, and you like that golden thread of information between data, people, and systems. We're going to move on. We're still talking about data and Geoplace and things, but talking more about a collaboration. So Geoplace works really closely with an organization called Geovation. Can you tell us a bit more about what Geovation is and how you work with them and support them?
Yeah, so Geovation, it was set up just over 15 years ago by Ordnance Survey and the Land Registry. And the idea of that was to kind of facilitate a kind of geospatial ecosystem so that startups involved in geospatial data can kind of thrive. It's incredible the amount of kind of startups that come through there. I think there's been over kind of 1,000 members, and so they're based in Clerkenwell. They've got their own kind of startup office there called the Geovation Hub, and they really want that to be the kind of the key place to go to for kind of geospatial thinkers. So they host things like GeoMob on a fairly regular basis every quarter, as well as lots of kind of projects that are happening with MHCLG and others. We as Geoplace, we used to be kind of across the city from them, but would often kind of attend events on a regular basis. But with the kind of pandemic a few years ago, Geoplace, we kind of changed our ways of working, so we're a lot more flexible in how we do, and we didn't need the big office that we used to have. So now we actually share an office with Geovation. So we're based there in Clerkenwell, and we try and work really closely with the startups. It's really fantastic to see the way they're using our data. So we try and be there to provide kind of technical expertise, point them in the right direction. A lot of the time these startups they know the problems, they know the technical solutions, but sometimes, as you say, like the jargon around the data, that can be confusing to people. So I like to think that we're able to kind of break some of those barriers down and point them in the right direction of the different data that's out there and how they can benefit from using USRNs and UPRNs in their products.
That's awesome. And Geovation is a really cool, it's fantastic for startups. I remember visiting years ago, and it was brilliant seeing the different groups there. We're going to keep on kind of that track of other organizations and things, but you are such a massive advocate for local authorities and how they manage a huge amount of information for the public realm. Can you tell us more about what your associates in local authorities are doing and why they're quite often overlooked when praise should be allocated to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to confess I'm a little bit biased in this regard, having worked at a local authority and done that role. But I really think they're the kind of the unsung heroes of the geospatial community, in that I think we often hear about these kind of big central projects, which I think are fantastic, but they're often thinking about the kind of the output and the user interface and the tools to interact with it. But really, the projects often fall short when the data quality is not up to scratch, and so much of the data that powers these national projects is collected by local authorities. And I think it doesn't always get the recognition for that it deserves. So any opportunity I can get, I'd love to kind of talk about that. I think, like so many organisations, they've faced kind of tremendous kind of cuts over the last years, and it's incredible the amount that they continue to do under such pressure. So I'm a huge fan for what they do, and always like to give them the recognition for that work.
I think I agree with you. And often when I think about, local authority geospatial people, they're the ones really keeping everything together in the back end. There's always that joke, isn't there, that geospatial person was just in the corner with their own desk, and they knew all the systems, all the databases, and they were all linking it together for the web maps. That's kind of what I grew up with and knowing from, but now it's apparently getting better. But I do think you're right. I think we need to be shouting more about these people in geospatial and local authorities. So you've mentioned kind of GeoMob, but networking in geospatial is often quite tricky. But there are some brilliant examples out there. Could you tell us a bit more about those brilliant networking opportunities for people in geospatial?
Yeah, so kind of GeoMob is one of my favourites. It's a kind of user group that meets on a quarterly basis. There's GeoMob London and there's GeoMob Edinburgh. And then they now do it all over Europe as well. But essentially, it's a kind of opportunity for people working in geospatial to kind of get together. There's usually 4 or 5 different presenters that will present something they've been working on. And we have some really good discussions about that. And then it's very fortunately sponsored by some really great sponsors, including Esri and Ed Parsons. And they sponsor Geo Beers afterwards. So we all pop down the local pub afterwards and just talk about what's been presented. So yeah, a really great community there. And it's just getting more and more popular. I think the last one was around kind of 80 people kind of crammed in the room, which is brilliant to see. And then there's more kind of structured organisations. So the AGI, so the Association for Geographical Information, it's something that we as Geoplace, we're all members of it and huge advocates for the work they do in trying to bring the geospatial community together, kind of think about what we need to think about for the future, and kind of work with all of those kind of relevant partners to kind of help and support what we do. Also for, I guess, not quite as much for housing, but the government geography profession is a really great network for people that want to kind of meet other geospatial people working in the industry. And then we're big fans of FOSS4G. So FOSS is free and open source software for geospatial. I think they've just had their conference up in Leeds last month, which my colleague Chris Carlin was at. But yeah, I think there are lots of opportunities. I do notice within the industry that over the last 5 years, a lot of us are kind of working remotely. And I do think back to kind of my early career and the amount that I learned from kind of Ian Winters and the people I worked with just sitting side by side. I'm a massive advocate for making sure we're still having those opportunities, particularly for younger people to kind of get involved, people early in their careers, to learn from others. So I think community is such an important part for geospatial, and kind of being open and attending these networks is really key for that.
I think I really liked literally in your last sentence where you talk about community. And like we in geospatial, we're quite happy being open and talking to each other, but actually having dedicated time to listen to each other and hear loads of ideas. If there's anyone in housing who hasn't been to either a GeoMob or an AGI conference or FOSS4G, they're brilliant. Just go and attend, even if you're not a geospatial person, if you just appreciate how spatial data can support. Brilliant seeing some of the really innovative ideas that are coming through from them, or even just really sensible, practical ones and just good implementation. We're coming up to the end, so you're doing all right, Jonathan, in terms of timing, so you needn't have worried. We're going to crack on with our always typical final question, and that's if you had an unlimited budget, what would you do with it?
Ooh, that is a really good one. I'm going to be perhaps a bit more focused on data. I often think about like what system I'd use and like how powerful my laptop would be. But what kind of really interests me and what I kind of desperately think that we need as kind of UK PLC is a cadastre. I'm really fascinated in the ways that geospatial data's dealt with across the world, and this kind of term cadastre, it kind of dates back, I think it's Latin, I don't know the exact meaning, but it dates back to kind of the Doomsday books in England, trying to like put land parcels together. But certain countries have done really fantastic work. Netherlands and Holland always really kind of sticks out in that regards, in that they've set up a cadastre to think about making data available, geospatial data available to all of the people that need it and for the different purposes, and how they fund that. So they've got a central cadastre set up that's collecting all of the land data, all of the ownership data, all of the property data. I feel like there's so much we can do from that. They've got interesting ways of paying for it. I'm aware I've got an unlimited budget, but what they do is they apply a kind of tax to every property sale. to actually pay to make that data available. And what that means is that rather than waiting like 2 to 3 months for a property sale, properties typically sold in 2 weeks because they've got all of that data available in one central source. My dream is to have something like that in UK PLC, but go even further. Think about the underground data, the above ground data of the road network, and also kind of think not just kind of property sales and for planning, but think more widely about that kind of that upkeep of the home. So I'd be really interested from a housing point of view, kind of what data you'd like to see in a cadastre.
That's really interesting, in all honesty. So, just taking a bit of a personal stance. So, I've just bought a house, and ours was held up by quite a long time because there's a path that was built, and it was uncertain who owned it or if we had right of access, and that took 6 weeks to figure out, which was nuts. But the idea that that's all part of the cadastre and sales go through within weeks rather than waiting. If we do 3 months, that's a good turnaround time in the UK. 6 weeks is almost unheard of. So I think that would be really, I think that's a really brilliant process, especially when we talk about the underground assets as well as the overground. That's a really cool one, and I like it. And I hope that becomes a reality, because that's a really brilliant use of to support housing associations. I think for housing, it would be those kind of rights of accesses. Is there any infrastructure which could affect maintenance, or they would have to maintain? I think that's really, really cool. Oh, you've given me a lot of things to think about, but thank you so much for today, Jonathan. It's been absolutely fantastic having you on. If anyone who has listened in wishes to get in touch, what's the best way for them to do so?
So if you want to know more about Geoplace, we've got our website, geoplace.co.uk. We've got really terrific newsletter, and we love to kind of highlight through case studies work that's happening. We'd love to hear more about work that's happening within the housing sector around UPRNs and USRNs. For me personally, my email address is jonathan.bates@geoplace.co.uk. As you know, I always love a chat, so I'm always happy to kind of talk about what's happening and any ideas that you have. And then also on LinkedIn, I think it's just my handles like Jonathan J Bates, so you can find me there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And to those of you who've been listening today, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to get more involved in the podcast, please feel free to get in touch. You can find us either on our website at www.housinggeospatial.co.uk, or else just head on over to LinkedIn and find Housing Geospatial. Thank you so much, everyone. Jonathan, thank you so much, and have a good day.
Cheers,
Jonathan.